Hi, I am Assad, and I'm also playing techie today, so please bear with us. I'll be running around a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, we don't. To try, Assad, it'd be lovely just to, as one of the other producers on the project, hear a little bit about how we all responded to Kenny Bow's initial idea and transformed it into the project that we have started to develop.
Yeah, great. Sorry, I was just also double checking that that the tech's working as well. So I've got like 4 brains on at the moment, so I'm a little bit. Okay, yeah. So I remember when Kemibo rang me initially to talk about the Othello project. We just finished doing the final play of our Stratford 6 project, and that was like a really, really lovely experiment between all of us in the company to during lockdown to sort of create some work. And yeah, Kemibo rang. She said she's got this new idea, and we talked about it, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. And I guess Othello the play was, that was a springboard, and there was an inspiration there. But we wanted to sort of flesh out that and go, how do we approach new writing with that kind of thing in mind? So we got together some of the group of the Stratford 6 projects, you guys, and we set up a Zoom meeting initially, just all of us just sit and chat, really, just chat about what happened in the world during that time, and also how we feel about it, and how we feel we want to, I guess how we could approach writing something new with all of those things around us in our heads. And it was a really, really great meeting. And then we set up another meeting where we basically gave everyone, all the writers, a task to think of someone in history that they'd like to explore. A person in history who has had some sort of significant contribution to Western society, who has in some way assimilated themselves, and has made a life and had to adapt or survive. And everyone went away and did some research, and then we had another Zoom meeting where we came back and discussed those people individually and what we could do. And so it kind of sort of springboarded from there. And also we had another Zoom meeting session with an expert called Bennett Brandreth, who is a Shakespeare buff, and he knows everything about Shakespeare, and especially rhetoric as a form of communication and speech giving in Shakespeare. And we explored that in Othello, and how we could possibly use rhetoric in our own pieces. And that was really insightful. And then we went away. We went away for about 4 weeks, 5 weeks, developing our scripts. And each of them are really diverse in their own way, and they speak very, very. They're very different voices, but also they say something very familiar as well, which is amazing. And we're here today. I think just sort of can't wait to start the next step of actually producing these pieces. But yeah.
And each of those characters is an individual who has made a contribution but may not be remembered or be in public art.
Yes, yeah. So they're not particularly famous or infamous. Not a lot of people have heard about them, but they should.
Great, thank you, Assad. I've noticed a few other people are joining us. Just to say, there are some fantastic questions that we will get to very soon. Now I'm going to be joined by Assad, who has going to tell us a little bit about who he's written about and why.
Yeah, why? I don't know. So I really struggled in the beginning of talking about the Othello Project. Struggled to find someone of South Asian descent that A, wasn't very well known, but B, also did a lot in Western society. My first the first person that kind of sprung to my mind was Amir Khan, and I was like, should I write about Amir Khan? And then I realized I don't really know anything about boxing, so that was that kind of went out the window. And then I was like, there's Gandhi and other people, but so many people have written about Gandhi, and there's so many films about Gandhi, and Gandhi's very well known. So I was really quite struck and quite surprised by how hard it was for me to think of a brown person who made a contribution in this society, society that I know. And I was like, unless they're amazing, unless they've achieved excellence, I don't really know who they are. And then I remember talking to an Asian friend of mine in London, and we were just having a walk, and she told me that she came across this blue plaque that had this unusual name on it, and she was interested with who that was, and she was like, this is a brown name, I've never heard of this person before. So she did some research and sent me an article about Dadabhai Naoroji, and I read that article and I was straight away blown away, and I thought, God, how have I never heard of this person? And I thought, that's the person I need to write about. So Dadabhai Naoroji was an Indian man who was born and brought up in Bombay, and the significant part of his life is that he did a lot of amazing things, but he was the first Indian MP to stand in Parliament and represent a British constituency. He represented Central Finsbury, and he came over here in 1892 and ran for Parliament, ran as an MP, and became completely out of the odds, just represented Central Finsbury. He was an amazing person because he started off as a kind of, I'm rambling here, but he started off as an activist and a sort of political worker in India, but he slowly realized that the things that he wanted to do to help his people weren't being. This is the height of the British Empire, by the way, and he realized he had to come over here where the heart of power was, and he decided to run for government so that he could speak for people, for his people. Kind of what I'm talking about. I didn't much about it yesterday.
And your piece imagines his maiden speech in Parliament. What made you choose to write specifically his voice in that environment?
Yeah, so when I read about him the first time, I immediately thought it would be interesting to hear what his maiden speech, his first speech in Parliament, would have been like. It's an interesting moment in his life because he's about 50 something when he gets into Parliament. So he's done a lot in India, and then he died. He was 93 when he died. So this is like sort of a midpoint of his life and his career. And it's an interesting insight because he's got a lot of optimism. Reading about him, he. What's interesting is that he wanted to work with the British Empire. He wanted to strengthen the British Empire in the beginning of his sort of political career. He wanted his people to thrive and the economy in India to sort of prosper so that it helped everyone. And I thought that was a really nice kind of thing to explore, especially in his maiden speech, and how, knowing in hindsight that never happened, people didn't listen to him. The common kind of phrase that people used to use about Dadabhai Naoroji is that every time he used to come into Parliament, to speak, half the room would leave. So this is before all of that. This is before people found him boring or dull or whatever. And I just wanted to explore that optimism for the future, and wanting to create something and work with people, and before he realizes that these people do not want to hear him and do not really care. And later on in his life, when he got to the end of his life, he was really disenfranchised by the whole process of Parliament. He was kicked out after 2 years of being in Parliament. didn't really, hadn't really made as much progress as he really wanted to. And only by the end of his life, that's when I guess he became a little bit more radicalized in his views, as radical as you can say, as in saying, no, the empire is not going to do anything for us. We need independence. We need to, and he was one of the founding people of the Indian National Congress, which then later on helped independence, basically. So yeah.
There's something interesting about how others viewed him. When we've talked before, you've told me how Gandhi viewed him. Can you just say a little bit about that, because I think it's really helpful for those watching?
Yeah. So, and this, I guess, this is part of the reason why a lot of people don't know about Nauroji, and a lot of people in India don't know about Nauroji either. Everyone knows Gandhi's name. Gandhi was a teenager when Nauroji stood for Parliament here, and he was living in South Africa, and Gandhi used to write to Nauroji and talked openly about Nauroji being his inspiration. Nauroji was a precursor to Gandhi and influenced a lot of the future views of Gandhi and people around. Fascinating to see those two people, because Gandhi had this. By the time Gandhi came along, I guess Nauroji's vision had this kind of solidified, and Gandhi became the embodiment of that. Nauroji was a little bit more kind of. He wanted freedom and he wanted liberation for his people, but he was a little bit more, because the empire was in its height. He was a little bit more tactical about the way he approached that. So that's why he wanted to work with the British government and work alongside with that. He knew that he'd piss people off if he'd gone straight for. But yeah, that's part of the reason I think a lot of people don't remember him and remember Gandhi, because Gandhi did kind of. His vision was just more empowering, whereas Nauroji was a little bit more back-footed, maybe a little bit, and then later on became empowered.
Thank you. Could we hear a little bit from the piece that you've written?
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, I have already mentioned this election was not won solely on the agenda of political reform in India, but rather on a number of high-profile causes and objectives that complement and share a commonality with causes in India, but are spread across all corners of the empire. My work on agricultural economics, for example, has interested the minds of many British farmers, and I was curious to receive a note from farm labourers in Northamptonshire which read, "You may be sure that by no class of our countrymen is your return to Parliament a matter for greater congratulation than it is among our agricultural workers. While the farm labourers could not pronounce your name, they believe Nauroji to be their representatives as well." This gesture of solidarity I know is felt by many English natives, and I reach out my hand in the same gesture of solidarity with my white brothers and sisters. However, I would be remiss if I failed to recognise that my journey to this house was not in huge part due to the love and admiration I have for my own country and its people. It is this love that drove my endeavour to promote women's education in Bombay and subsequently open several schools for girls, a feat that, whilst I acknowledge it was talked about by the Sobs governing over us, they failed to create any momentum for themselves. Although I am sure they are brilliant minds focused on larger matters of interest. It is also my admiration for my people which led me to a question I could not resolve sitting comfortably in my home in Bombay.
Thank you. Thank you, Assad. Okay, we are going to jump in.